Revelation 12 verse 6 says this, "The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days." We spent plenty of time in chapter 11 discussing the significance of the number 1,260. So I won't take the time to rehash that now. We've also talked about the identity of the woman. Is she Israel? Is she Mary? Or something else? What we do know, according to verse 1, is that she is a sign, and a great one at that. I think the best way to make sense of this great sign is that it seems to be a representative, it seems to be representative of God's people. It is out of God's people, Israel, that Jesus the Messiah has come. And it is God's people, the church, that remains after the ascension, awaiting his return. Now, the aforementioned waiting happens in this case in the wilderness. We might interpret things this way. Following Christ's ascension, the church flees to the wilderness for some determined amount of time. The wilderness itself is a metaphor with a rich history among God's people. Literally, it could be translated as a desolate or a deserted place, sometimes a solitary place. But when many of us think or hear the word wilderness, it's not just a generic or desolate place. We hear it in context of the story of Israel sojourning in the wilderness following their exodus from Egypt, which isn't merely a story of desolation, but of God's provision and protection. We can find a similar theme in 1 Kings 17. After Elijah prophetically announces the drought, he goes to a place called Kerith Ravine. I'll grant you that Kerith Ravine isn't technically called a wilderness in the text, but as a destination, it's assumed to be east of the Jordan River, which is typically understood as the wilderness. It's here that the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. That's provision. And we should also bear in mind when we think about the wilderness that in the Gospels, it was the place Jesus often sought out for communion with the Father. In Mark 1, after Jesus casts out a demon in the synagogue and he spends the evening healing, early in the morning Jesus gets up and goes out to the wilderness to pray. Thus, it's not merely a place of provision and protection, it is also a place of connection and formation. Just to dig a little deeper on the protection issue, when I suggest the wilderness was a place of protection, I mean in terms of spiritual, not physical protection. As I said last time, the devil was allowed to do its worst to our Lord. So Revelation neither proffers nor predicts any physical protection of the church from persecution. Now, I said I wouldn't do this, but to circle back, I contended in chapter 11 that the two witnesses represent the church. They prophesy for 1,260 days and then are attacked by the beast, overpowered and killed. In chapter 12, the woman who is now representative of the church flees to the wilderness for 1,260 days. Here, the connection. After which point, in verse 17, the dragon makes war against her offspring. Now, the visions are different, but I would argue they are reflective of the same reality told from differing perspectives. All that being said, the wilderness is not our home. Though the text tells us God himself has prepared this place for us, we are not to reside indefinitely. Our time in the wilderness is fixed and it will come to an end. In the meantime, we are to entrust ourselves to God's care, to avoid the rebellion and quarreling that marked the Israelites' time in the wilderness, but follow the example of faith and obedience of our Lord in his time there. Have a blessed week.